Hey, good evening. Welcome to Right Talk with Mike Lee.
Hello, sir.
This evening, have hopefully an interesting discussion that's going to probably and hopefully ruffle a few feathers. I may even get mine ruffled a little bit, but I'm always trying to look and learn. You know, learning is not always pleasant. Can oftentimes be a little bit irritable. I know I read a long time ago that learning was irritating. That in the process of learning, your mind becomes at disequilibrium, and reaching equilibrium again, you get learning. So I have with me this evening, I don't know if we're friends or not, but we're pretty good acquaintances, at least for sure.
I would have called us friends.
This my buddy Robert Thomas. Robert and I are both the rarest of animals in the sense that we're conservatives. We're black conservatives. He's also a lawyer. I don't hold that against him. He doesn't hold it against me. You went to, where'd you go to? Did you go to UT?
UT Law. Mm-hmm.
You went to UT Law?
Went to UT Law.
I was a Mustang, man.
Yeah?
And it was, you know what's strange about that? Is when I got to SMU Law School, during first year, they kept talking about UT this and UT that. And I was wondering, did I go to the right place?
What were they talking about UT at SMU for?
I don't know. I don't know why. They were talking about the professors down here or something.
Okay.
Because I had a professor for civil procedure, Dorsanio. Who
Dorsanio.
wrote the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I understand he graduated #1 from UT. And from what I heard, the whole time I was at SMU's law school, they were trying to steal him from SMU to come teach at UT.
Okay, all right.
But there was some kind of quiet rivalry going on there.
Huh.
But there's been no rivalry between Robert and I so far.
Nope, nope.
We disagree on a couple of things.
Very few that I know so far.
But Robert, you were on my show earlier, one of my early shows with along with Kennard.
Yep.
Another one of us other brave brothers who forged in the path of dealing with these conservative folks who happen to be of a different color than we might be.
Yeah.
But I kind of looked at things as being a conservative and a black man. And it seems to me that racism exists on both sides, both on the conservative side of the house and the liberal side of the house, as far as I'm concerned.
Humans are humans.
So I take exception and umbrage with some of my conservative brothers who happen to be white, because I believe the political situation is such that what makes us rare animals is 90% of African Americans seem to support the liberal side of the house, which is the Democrats. And they look at us like, in many respects, like we did something wrong, like something is wrong with us. As a matter of fact, I was on a radio show with Ken Thompson, and they were doing a call-in, and there was a lady called in about her son who was at Texas Christian, and he was entertaining Republican ideas, and she thought he needed to see a psychiatrist.
Oh, my.
And if you follow, I don't know how close you follow me on Facebook, but I start a lot of mess. And I like to.
I follow you closely on Facebook. I get your post. The algorithms always pop you in my feed.
Because to me, Facebook to me is kind of like a laboratory. I look at that as an opportunity to learn and just to see where people are and see where I'm dealing with, because I believe that in order to be maximally effective in the political arena, we've got to play both sides. That's the way I see it. And 90% on the Democratic or liberal side of the house, especially when they lost, is not a good thing, from my view. So I hope that that to be able to use Facebook as a way to communicate with people conservative ideas.
Some of your friends on there, y'all poke each other hard, man. In fact, I wouldn't say poke. You guys go slugfest with each other. I'm like, I figure you have to know these people really well and go way back because y'all keep coming back at each other.
Most of them, I love them, and most of them I played sports with them as a child.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
You'll see Lefty and I go at it real hard sometimes. Now, Lefty played on the baseball team. I showed you in the video, in my intro video.
Yep.
The white guy, Bob Klotz, was
Yep.
our baseball coach. Bob was our baseball coach. And Lefty and I are really, we are more like brothers than anything else. But we're very close because I was the only one who could catch his curve.
Wow.
He's a left-handed pitcher. He had a curve that was out of sight.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, at the high school, he went to Princeton High School in Cincinnati. He held the strikeout record. And we had a, we had a reunion of the baseball team about 3 years ago. And he said something to me at the reunion that really struck me and stayed with me. I still think about it. He said of all the people they played baseball with, I was the one who could handle his curve the best.
Wow. Athlete to athlete, y'all had that respect.
And I used to do crazy things in baseball practice. Like I say, Lefty, throw your hardest fastball, or throw your nastiest curve, and I'd catch it barehanded.
Wow.
Just acting crazy, but I was like that. And I guess I'm still acting kind of crazy because I'm on the conservative side of the house, being an African American, rather than on the liberal side of the house with the crowd. But I've always had a certain look at. I've always thought that if the crowd goes to the left, look for Michael Lee to be going to the right real hard, because I think the crowd. I'm not sure that the crowd is always right.
Yeah.
And I always wonder when the crowd is going this way, I wonder what's over here. I'm a curious type of person.
The point is independent, free thinking. You don't want to be a sheep. You want to be an independent free thinker and make the decision, at least that's what I'm interpreting, the direction you're going to go based upon your own self-determination as opposed to just following somebody in front of you.
That's a great intellectual analysis now. The way I say it, I just do stuff that's just crazy. But I'm sure Christopher Columbus was probably thought of as being crazy. And those guys that went to the moon, they might have been a little bit crazy. I always wanted to be actually, growing up, my first dream was to be an astronaut.
Okay.
When I was in third grade, reading my weekly reader and that kind of stuff, I wanted to be an astronaut because I wanted to be the first person to go to the moon. Not the first black man. I wanted to be the first person on the moon, period. And this
You grew up in a proud community. I'm sure that y'all didn't make a distinction. You were a human being first and foremost. You didn't lead with color in that beautiful community. I read that article, that was just phenomenal about the self-determination of your community there in Ohio. What you said, it's a square mile?
1 square mile, Lincoln Heights.
Lincoln Heights created its own economic strength, it created everything. Nobody created anything for it. It's amazing the foresight and the commitment of a community. There was no issue about color until color was superimposed on Lincoln Heights to stop it from being successful and destroy the community.
Actually, Lincoln Heights was probably the worst and best place to grow up. We were poor and black. Most of the people in Lincoln Heights were people who migrated to the north after World War II. And many of them were like my parents, sharecroppers. But in Lincoln Heights, although we were an all black community surrounded by just about all white communities, we grew up as a family pretty much.
Absolutely.
For example, if you were doing something that you shouldn't be doing on one end of town, by the time you got home on the other end of town, and we lived on the other end of town, somebody's parents might whip you on this end, and by the time you got home, you might get a whipping on the other end because they didn't heard about it.
It takes a village, man. It takes a village. That's where that phrase came from.
But I just believe that, you and I were talking before the show, I believe that there'll always be a lot of Lincoln Heights in me. But the main thing we got was a fight. And we weren't mad at anybody. We weren't mad at the white people in the neighborhoods around us. any more than they were mad at us. When we played their team, if we, for example, if we went to Reading and played, when we left there, they threw rocks at our bus, and when they came to play in Lincoln Heights, we threw rocks at their bus. I mean, that's just how it went. We're just humans. We're just people. Yeah. And there didn't seem to be a lot of animosity as much as it was competition without animosity.
So Lincoln Heights, if I remember reading correctly, was created because it was effectively the freedmen's town, if you will. It was the area that blacks were required to live in. It was where they congregated, right? That was like kind of like the 1929 plan required African Americans, if they wanted in Austin, if they wanted city services, they had to live in east of I-35, what is now I-35.
Here's how Lincoln Heights came about. When Cincinnati was across the river from Kentucky. Cincinnati, Ohio was a free state. Kentucky was in the South, a slave state. Now, when you cross the Ohio River into Cincinnati, you went to free land. Where Lincoln Heights is about 16 miles from the river, I believe. And it was the first area where black people were permitted to own property. And it really originally was supposed to be much bigger than what it was. But it was eventually
whittled down.
Whittled down.
That's what I read.
Because there were white communities that incorporated around it, and it took away land from it,
and that was intentional. I understand that I read that it was intentional, that to limit the ability for Lincoln Heights to be able to annex.
We had no space.
And so it was an intentional, conscious decision by the conservative white communities to limit and box your community in. And then I read that they also impacted, you had your own school district, but that they impacted where by their own taking in property. I can't remember why, I just lose the word for a second, but limited the economic base. And so when you didn't have an economic commercial tax base, then that was strangling your community. That is a story that we see over and over and over again in the black community, and it happened by conservatives and liberals. And that's been the issue, I think, that you and I have been talking about, where I've seen others have been talking about what I think is the discussion today. You know, for one group or the other, you know, the Democrats or the Republicans, basically be the same flip side of the same coin on the impact to black communities and the black community and the black culture.
Well, I don't know about you, but for me, from a personal and professional perspective, it's tough being a Republican, especially when you're black. But I used to be a little bit more sensitive about the criticism that I get, but I've become hardened over time. But I really didn't like the fact they think that we're traitors. And they call us traitors, sellouts, Uncle Toms, all kinds of names. But I don't think any of those are true. I think things are changing just a bit. And I got a video clip I want you to take a look at, then we come back and
Okay.
I came in from Atlanta. I'm from Chicago, but I've come up under the realization that we got to educate our people about the Democratic Party, because he's talking about Dr. King. If Dr. King was living today, he would not be talking about the Democratic Party. I promise you that, because the Democratic Party did nothing for us. Nothing. The only thing the Democratic Party is doing is keeping us as slaves, and all these brothers and sisters that's rolling with the Democratic Party, that's in all these positions, they ain't doing nothing either. Now, I've been down in Atlanta dealing with a lot of ministers, and I got to saying, they can't beat me to the bathroom. You know, and that's the real truth of the matter. And they keep talking about the talent temp, all the brothers and sisters coming out of college. That ain't the talent temp, because if that was true, we wouldn't be in the condition that we're in. The real talent temp is brothers coming from prison that has woke up and their DNA is exploding, and they out here telling the truth about what we need to be doing. The Republican Party, we're really talking about a lot of the same things, and our people are Republican anyway. You follow what I'm saying? So again, anytime you're around a lot of our people in the Democratic Party, they want to keep us subservient. Like I was saying, we got two of us we got two different mentalities in our nation. Those of us that want to rule ourselves and those that want to be ruled by other people. The Democratic Party, they want to be ruled by other people, and we ain't got no problem with that. That's why the meetings that we go to, you don't see the Jesse Jackson, the Al Sharpes, the NAACP, SCLC in the meetings that we have, because this ain't the meeting for them. They want to be ruled by other people. We on the march to rule ourselves, and that's why I'm hearing everything that Paul McKinley is saying, because, you know, we've been trained to go in there and hit the level just because it's a Democrat. And that's what we got to get out of. I had a mentality, when I hear brothers say Republican, I thought he was a traitor. You follow what I'm saying? Until I realized what this is really all about, and they have our people conditioned. All the pastors in the church, when they hear Republican, they turn their shoulders up and they turn their nose up at people that say they're Republican. And we really got to educate our people about, look at what the Democratic Party has done for us. When you look at our community, you're looking at what the Democratic Party has done for us so far. To us and for us. So all of this has been done by the Democratic Party. So it's time for us to jump ship and go and do a new thing. And like Paul said, everywhere I go, they be getting upset when I be talking about us moving like the Democratic Party. I've been talking to them about, why don't y'all quit crying about these jobs? They want to go to other people and cry to these people. Y'all ain't giving us no jobs. Well, listen to the reality of that. You're asking people to give you the jobs that they're creating for their people. Are you kidding me? You follow what I'm saying? So this is the nonsense that's going on in the Democratic Party. And the only thing, I've been down in Atlanta and New Orleans, they only want to keep complaining. This is where they're keeping up a lot of trouble. They know monies are coming in. And you sitting at the table with the opportunity to block this money or to say, look, how are we going to cut this money up with everybody? They don't have the backbone to say it at the meeting, but when the money do come, then they want to create problems by complaining that these people ain't doing the right thing. This is the nonsense that's going on. You follow what I'm saying? If you didn't have a backbone to speak up when the money, you knew the money was coming, to stop it, to block it, to say, look, this money ain't coming to our town until we know how we cutting it up. You didn't have the backbone to say it then, but then when the money gets to the table, you want to complain. So I'm like, oh, the white folks stealing all the money. That's what's wrong with our people right now today. Now, this brother Paul McKinley, he had a backbone to take to stop the things that's taking place before they happen. And this is what you call provoking violence. These people just provoking stuff by not speaking up. And they the ones that's provoking all the trouble. Because I get tired of, and our youth ain't hearing that, because our youth keep seeing our people who call themselves leaders complaining and protesting. This ain't the 60s, and we ain't got time to be marching no more. And that's why the youth ain't feeling it. They ain't even going to church. Why? Because the churches are Democrats. The churches are the ones, our biggest problem is our community churches. These church leaders, and we got Inglewood, 300 churches, and a black-owned bank, and a black-owned grocery store. All of these churches, Democrats. Everywhere we go, we have problems. What are they? Democrats. So we need to move into another ticket. That's all I got to say. And we have to educate our people about the difference between Republican and Democrat. And just because a person's Democrat, don't be hitting that button. You don't even know what that person is talking about. That person could be a Ku Klux Klan because he's a Democrat. We're hitting the tape. We're hitting the ticket. And that's why our problems are lying. So we have to be the men that have the backbone to say the things that have to be said. And like he said, I'm all for him, because down in Atlanta I said we need to form a group called X Factor, because we do make a difference. We make all the difference in the world because we have a backbone to take to say the things that they won't say. That's all I got to say.
Robert, this guy makes a couple of points that I think are significant in that. He's talking about a change. He's talking about making a change. And to me, there's a change that needs to be made. If you vote 90% the wrong way, and you got maybe 6 or 7% the other way, in a political sense, you really have no reason or cause to expect anything because you haven't contributed anything to the victory. But at the same time, those on the winning side, I think, have an obligation to do what is right. And those who are on the prevailing side right now, the Republicans, the conservatives, I think are negligent in that there's not an effort made to reach out and grow. And I think there's an opportunity to do so. People who talk like what this guy is talking about, there's a general feeling out there like kind of like that. I read something this morning about younger people are waking up to, people are beginning to wake up to what liberals are talking about. They're really talking about taking control. Is really what they're talking about. They want to regulate bathrooms. I mean, really now, come on now. There are more important things than who use the bathroom. What I've jokingly said on Facebook, something like we ought to have a legislation to have bathrooms for bears. They shouldn't have to use the bathroom in the woods behind a tree. They should have bathrooms. But
you know, Mike, if we take it to the 50,000-foot level, one of our mutual friends on Facebook, who I believe you introduced me to on Facebook, makes the point. But what is it that should cause the black community to vote Republican?
she asked that today.
She asked that today, I believe. And the point is, the point she's making is, and she says it very, very effectively, and she considers herself a strong conservative, and she is not afraid to poke the eye in the liberal bear or the conservative bear's eye. And she says, look, what is it about the policies that you want to enact that should cause the black community to support you, GOP? What is it that you're going to change, Democratic Party, that would make the black community want to stay with you? And I think that that really is the issue. What is it? So until our community gets engaged and we become a force to be reckoned with, a voting force to be reckoned with, that can literally change the outcome of an election or can materially impact it, as Obama pushed for, as Hillary Clinton tried to get the whole black American effect, behind her when she was running. Until we are consistently engaged as a party, as a community, individually thinking and demanding, I guess as this gentleman said on the video clip, demanding to understand how these economic policies are to benefit all of us. What is there to make the black community want to turn to the GOP any more than would make them want to stay with the Democratic Party?
I think that it's important to get down to basics of what works and what doesn't.
Okay.
And to me, when I look at values, when work is abandoned as a value, you have a problem. Now, I think all pretty much agree that education is the key. And education, information, and work. I mean, it doesn't do any good to just be educated. You got to work at something. And the other thing I think that generally most black people are pretty conservative, because many of us may have come up like I came up in the Baptist church. And you're conservative in terms of your values.
I think that's generational, Mike. I think that people our age had a much closer connection with the church and traditional Christian values. I don't know that we can, as the gentleman pointed out in that video clip as well, I don't think we can make that assumption about the younger generation. What I can tell you that it's consistent across what I see in the younger generation is a questioning about what has either party done for them, right? And I don't mean it like you owe me something, but like Malcolm X said, or MLK said, are you going to get your foot off my neck? Are you going to, Malcolm X talked about equality of opportunity. Malcolm X talked about allowing like happened in Lincoln Heights, or didn't happen in Lincoln Heights, the ability for self-determination without the system being stacked against them. And unfortunately, when we're honest with each other, the system, whether it was run by the GOP or the system run by the Democrats, has all maintained institutional racism, systemic racism. And we still, as you talk about being a black lawyer today, nobody stopped me from being a lawyer, but I know I had to work extra hard. I was at a New Year's Eve party, sitting across the table from a good conservative, and I probably had a little bit too much to drink, Mike.
That could be a good thing.
But you know, the first thing he said, yeah, it was, because
sometimes the truth comes out.
And it allowed the truth to come out, right? And I'm sitting across that table, and I'm listening to him talk about how the black people took his spot at UT Law School. He was entering he would have entered the same class that I was entering, right? Now, was he directing that comment to me? No, but was he oblivious when he knew that I was a UT Law student who started law school in the same class, and he made a blanket statement and talked about all the lawsuit that was being brought against UT Law School? Same thing a couple weeks ago, but now a liberal. I was having lunch with a friend in Houston, and one of his friends came up and approached him and said, "Man, I'm so liberal, people think I'm black." I'm telling you, the institutional bias, the systemic bias is so deep that it impacts us today. 400 years of transatlantic slavery still exist in our systems today, which make it harder to be able to compete. So when Malcolm X was saying, we need to start our own coffee shops, we need to have our own businesses, we need to have our own banks, we need to have you also had to have a system in which the regulators were going to facilitate that happening. So when you talk about housing discrimination, when you talk about inequality of wealth, or the lack of wealth, equitable wealth distribution, you had a system and have a system in place to this day that still impedes the ability to allow black banks to be able to get capital, impedes blacks from being able to get equal opportunity, impedes blacks and other minorities from having access to opportunities so that they can compete. And so my position is, or my thought is, as I'm listening to black conservatives be as equally frustrated with the Republicans as they are with the Democrats, I'm starting to think, these points that they're making are very powerful. It doesn't matter who's controlling or driving the boat when the policies seem to be, that the rhetoric is different, but the policies seem to not be changing. And when I hear or see white conservatives that say there is no racism or there is no institutional bias, it makes me stop and think, what universe do you live in? It's not mine, because I consider myself conservative. I have been a Ronald Reagan Republican since I was in high school. I was a member of the high school Republicans. I was vice chairman of the college Republicans for 2 years. I have always identified myself as a fiscal conservative. And now I find out that there are people in the GOP that call me a rhino because they negate my black experience growing up in the South. They negate my experience being half Anglo and half white, walking in both of those worlds and seeing and living racism, institutional racism. Now that doesn't mean that I want anybody to give me a handout. But like MLK, I want them to take the boot off my neck, and I don't want the boot to be on your neck or any child's neck for that matter. I want equal opportunity so people can compete on their merit.
Well, I think you raised several important points, Robert. I think that to expect change within a person, to me, change is between that person and the Creator. I may have a small part in it, but I don't know that I have a right to expect that. I also don't think
I don't understand what you're saying. I
don't think I have say racism is real.
Correct.
And its impact and effects are real.
Correct.
And so to me, that can be demonstrably shown in numbers, in many ways. So I don't think it makes sense to deny it, as many of my conservative brethren who happen to be white will do.
Okay.
They'll like to claim it doesn't exist. I think that's ridiculous and damnable.
We're sitting on the east side of Austin. We're surrounded by a community, the black community, who were limited in their ability to create economic wealth. And just like Lincoln Heights, as this community was creating economic wealth and viability with its own high school, the original L.C. Anderson High School, when they had their bankers, when they had a strong, viable community, right? Then that was all pulled away from them.
What happened with where I'm from, Lincoln Heights, has been just like a microcosm. Situation that's been repeated nationwide. Anytime you hear the term gentrification, that's what's going on.
And that's my point. In Lincoln Heights, it was the conservative communities that did it. In Austin, it was the liberal communities that did it. The flip side of the same coin, that is institutional racism. One side purports to be a proponent of equality and equal opportunity. but they don't change the rules
and
to make it that way.
And to be friendly.
Right, and to be friendly. The other side purports to not support, which I think is unfortunate, but you have, meaning that they get painted as racist. I've told people over and over and over again, I'm tired of liberals telling people who are my conservative friends that they're misogynistic racist without knowing who they are simply because they consider themselves Republican. But by the same token, I get tired of my Republican friends that say anybody that doesn't think their way, that they're a libtard or a snowflake. There's no communications going on there. That is just demonizing of each other, and it destroys the opportunity. When the reality is, when I'm in the center with one foot in the white community and one foot in the black community, literally, racially, because of who I am, I look at it and I see you're both just shooting at each other and talking over each other, and you're demonizing the other, and you're not recognizing what you're doing to an entire community that is the continuation of.
Now, what I find most disturbing is the fact that you have people on the left, people on the right, who may have different views of things, but there's such a thing as the right thing to do.
Correct.
And many times the right thing to do may be something that neither wants to do. And so when I think about solutions, when I think about solutions for the black community, I believe that it's important and incumbent upon the black community to try to find solutions itself. And to me, politically, the way to find a solution is to play the game. Now, if I can get this next tape up by Stephen A. Smith from ESPN,
Okay.
it kind of alludes to, touches on what I'm talking about.
Okay. Okay.
Stephen A. said that every black person in America should vote Republican for at least one election. Stephen A. Smith is joining me now. Stephen, who are you trying to send a message to? Republicans, Democrats, African Americans, all of the above?
I'd go with all of the above. That sounds about right, but specifically the Democratic Party from the standpoint that I definitely believe that the black vote has been taken for granted, and primarily the black community is at fault in my estimation in that regard, simply because on one hand, we're giving one party our vote because they've successfully gone about the business of convincing our community that the other party, the Republican Party, is completely against the interest of the black community. And as a result, we've been very transparent in our support. We've boarded hook, line, and sinker. We look at the Republican Party. I'm not talking about every single one of us, of course, but vast majority of black Americans look at the Republican Party as the enemy. We look at the Democratic Party, even tacitly, as our support base, and as a result, we are very transparent in our support for them. So because of it, they have a license to take us for granted. The Republican Party has a license to summarily dismiss us because they believe they'll never get our vote anyway. And then we end up finding ourselves devoid of any kind of representation whatsoever because nobody is really competing to garner our vote and our support. So I said what I said because I wanted folks in my community to stand up and recognize that if you go to a house or you go buy a car or whatever the case may be, you don't just see something you want and say, I want that. Tell me what the price is and I'll pay for it. Somebody has to flatter you in order to garner your dollars and your support. I think the same should apply to politicians who represent us.
Let me put this in the context of 2016, because I think given the monolithic nature of the African American vote, a lot of Republicans don't even make the ask. Rand Paul is making the ask. Is there anything that he can say that you think can change this equation?
Well, first of all, he can highlight some of the inconsistencies and discrepancies the opposing party might be throwing in our direction, things that we may not know. That's number one. Number two, one of the things that you need to do as a Republican, particularly if you're running for the presidency, you have to surround yourself with a bunch of folks that look like us and not just you, that look like Hispanics and not just you.
This is talking about, is really talking about playing the game to win, to me. And when I look at solutions to the situation that confronts black Americans, I think the solution is kind of put before us of what perhaps needs to be done by examining what happens with my brothers and sisters in the Asian community. Now, I happen to be on the board of directors of the advisory board for the Texas Asian Republican Assembly. And as a matter of fact, when we were talking before the show about Nichelle, I actually met Nichelle at the Texas Asian Republican meeting at the last state convention in Dallas. and furthermore, I look at what's happened in Austin. You see what's happening to the black community in Austin, but then at the same time in Austin, the Asian community is thriving. And to me, the Asian community is thriving in comparison to the black community in the sense that they put education first. They really have solid family structures, and they don't seem to be engaging in all this social experimentation with all this same-sex marriages, 2 men, 2 women, and a dog, and all that kind of stuff. They have more traditional families and traditional values. I think that ultimately, what happens, a person's reality.
I don't understand that last part about, marital experimentation. But what I can tell you is when I ran for city council, one of the issues, there were 2 critical issues we talked about, and that was how aggressively and quickly the black population was dwindling in Austin, and from a district perspective, the redistricting committee that was drawing the districts for city council elections was trying to create an African American district, which is now District 1, which is held by Houston. The other issue that kept coming up was that the Asian community, broadly speaking, the Asian community, there is no real concentration. To the extent there was a concentration of Asians, it was in District 6 now and District 10 now. And so the question was, if they are so diverse in their geographic, where they live geographically, where they'll vote, how are they going to be represented, number one, and number two, how are they going to have an impact? I think what the Asian community has done very, very effectively, and that the African community has not, is the Asian community has galvanized around each other and are engaged politically, they're engaged financially, and they're very aggressive about ensuring that the Asian community leadership, both older leadership and bringing up new leadership, younger leadership, engage on city boards, commissions, and in the environment, in the community, our civic engagement. I see that as the main distinction of why the Asian community is being able to influence, at least at the city level, politics versus what the black community is doing. So that's the distinction I think I would draw, Mike.
Okay, with due regard to your distinction to the distinction that you draw, Robert, but to me, what underlies all of that is there seems to be a focus on education.
Okay.
That I'm not sure that a similar focus has not been committed to in the black community.
Well, I don't know that that's true, but what I would tell you is, why is the Asian community focused and concentrated in District 10 and District 6? Because those communities are, have 2 communities that are some of the strongest school districts. So Anderson High School, vertical team is on side. Westwood High School, vertical team is in that school district. I mean, in that city council district in 6. And so I think what you see is a concentration on education, but you have economic, geographic mobility that allows that Asian community to move there to chase that educational opportunity. We're sitting in the heart of what had been the African American community, and we know that there is systemic inequalities in AISD in the African American community. And so we have a significant number of schools on this, elementaries and middle schools over on this side of town that are significantly underperforming, that also have a significant lack of enrollment, but also have a significant inequality in the result, their economic result. Is that because of the educational system? Is it because of the family structure not supporting it? I don't know, Mike, but I think that to the extent that we have black families that have economic mobility, then they're going to Pflugerville, or they're leaving, they're going to some place where their families, where their children can get an education. I think Gabe Nathalene is very, very aggressive, is running it for office again, and as a teacher in the Manor ISD, talking about the impact of poverty on the school districts and the children that don't have opportunities to be able to move out of that, and how they necessarily then have economic disadvantage, or they don't have equal opportunity, I think is what Gabe would tell me if I was sitting here with him.
Well, it seems to me that both of the clips that we've looked at this evening, both of them suggest a hint at playing at the black community being a political wild card as a ploy, which I think is something that should at least be tried. Because one thing is for sure, whatever's going on now isn't helping.
I agree. But
And
Mike,
if that's the case,
but how do you
to me, try anything.
But how do you convince the black community, as Mr. Smith pointed out, as the first gentleman, how do you convince the black community to look beyond the line that they've been fed? How do you convince them? Maybe it's what you said, the younger generation of African Americans are looking at blacks are saying, hey, this isn't working for me. It's not been working for my community, and it's been dominated by the Democrats. The Democrats tell me that they're in my best interest. Maybe I should look outside of the Democrats. Maybe I should look libertarian. Maybe I should look Republican. What is going to cause people to become free thinkers as opposed to accepting hook, line, and sinker? And do you think if that happens that that's going to change the perception that you and I hear? You know, when I go to Travis, and I haven't been in over a year, but when I've gone to Travis County Republican Party exec meetings, you know, I hear some things sometimes that surprise me, right? And then I hear some things that don't surprise me by people who don't surprise me because they've been saying those things for a long time. What is going to make the black community want to feel welcome in that environment? Most of the people in there are very warm and welcoming, but most of the people don't say much. It's those people that speak up that feel very strongly that there is no racism, or have comments that there is no inequality, or feel whatever. It's not that somebody wants somebody to be handed something, but it's to recognize that the system is not fair. The system is not equal, right? And so how do you and I keep going into those meetings and listening to that?
Well, I have some criticisms of my conservative brethren who happen to be white for this reason. For half a century, you've been demonized and said nothing. And human nature, if you keep hearing something over and over and you hear nothing to the contrary, you have nothing else to believe. And so there's been a damnable silence on the conservative side of the house, as I see it. And one of the reasons, as a matter of fact, one of the reasons that I started this show was we need to come out of these comfortable so-called cocoons we might think we're in, and start to say what our message and what our thoughts and what our philosophy is.
I agree with that.
Rather than have someone, we need to say who and what we are, define ourselves instead of letting some others define us.
Yes.
And say what we're about. And I think it's unfortunate and unnecessary and unreasonable to expect politically for someone to do something for you. I think you have to do something for yourself before you expect someone to do something for you.
Well, that's what you're doing, right? That's what we're doing now. We're talking. We're talking about issues that are impacting us as conservative black men, and we're willing to talk about the impact both from the liberal perspective and the conservative perspective,
right,
so that hopefully a dialogue will come about and people will start recognizing nobody's asking. I'm not asking anybody to give me anything. Nobody has ever
right,
given me anything. I've had to earn. My mother said, my mother made it clear, we are not victims. You will never be a victim. My mother made it clear, you will go out and you will fight as hard as it has to succeed. Sometimes I failed, but I never stopped fighting.
No.
My point is, I don't want anybody to give me anything. But if people who control the levers of power believe that the regulations are fair and equitable, believe that the systems and the institutions in place are fair and equitable, if they truly believe that, if they believe that the only issue is that people create race identity politics when they mention that discrimination exists, and that's what they say, oh, that's just identity politics. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're saying that that's identity politics, then you're inherently denying that the institutions and systems that manage the undercurrent and the structure of our society.
You're trying to dismiss it as though it isn't real.
You dismiss it as it's not real. And so if I'm not asking for somebody to give me anything or give anybody in the black community anything other than an equal opportunity. But if housing discrimination still exists, if it's still difficult for people to have equal education opportunities, if it's still difficult for them to have pay equity, right? You can never, and it's all based on a system of 400 years. You got to go back and recognize that's the way it is. It's not saying you're asking anybody to give you, but don't alienate. As a conservative, as the GOP cannot, and I think Reince Priebus tried to get to this point after the 2012 election cycle when they did the big national discussion and study on race issues. Not just black community, the Asian community, the Hispanic community as well. They tried to come in and say, if we don't make the party welcoming, and recognize that there are discrepancies and inequalities that exist and try to address the inequalities in the system, why would anybody ever want to come? And if people don't want to come, then the other party is going to continue to attract for generations the vote that we would desperately like to have. I think that that's reasonable.
Well, I look at when I think of my conservative brethren of whatever color, my thing is, do you want to win? First, that's my first question. Do you want to win? And first question, do you want to win? And the second question is, will trying to attract new voters help you win? And my thing is, I don't see where there's an effort or commitment to try to attract new voters, to grow.
That's right.
To me,
That's
it's
on
about
my
party
page.
growth.
I think so.
And
as
to
well.
me, I don't see a commitment. I don't see a financial investment. I know most of the times, like up to RPT, historically, it's been, well, we don't want to try to attract the back growth. That's not a good way to spend money. It's like they
you've
want an
worked
immediate.
hard.
It's like they want an immediate return.
You've worked hard to educate the African American community, the Black community, and I know the RPT has reached out to you and asked you to be a leader in communicating and a voice to communicating to the Black community. Do you feel like you got the kind of support and help that you needed to be able to be effective in that?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Not at this time. And that's why I say what I say, because there are businesses and organizations that want to do business, that want to do something. I know they did make some changes in Florida, and I was hopeful that what happened in Florida, we would try to at least build on something similar to that. But what happens in Florida, and I think it's more important that it happened, for whatever reason, I believe in my heart that what happens in Texas pretty much dictates what happens in the nation. I just believe that. Because we're kind of a leader economically, we're kind of a leader politically, and many of the things that feed that are positive about the conservative community originate in Texas. And so to me, what happens in Texas is crucial to what happens in the nation.
Well, it makes me wonder then. I know that Beto O'Rourke is running against Cruz, and all of the media is talking about how he's within points of Cruz, which is surprising, and that the Hispanic vote is going to be coming out super strong this election cycle, and that it is going to be part of this blue wave that they've been saying forever. I guess the question that I have is, if that's the case, is the Republican Party ceding the Hispanic vote to the Democrats, and is the Republican Party doing anything then to engage the Black vote and encourage the Black vote to become an active part of the Republican Party in any kind of meaningful way?
Now,
and I guess that's the question I ultimately have.
Now, from what I gather, the RPT is doing something in terms of the Hispanic population, but I don't know that much of anything is happening in terms of the Black population. I know there's been a regional approach going on, but I don't know, when I look at things.
Is that because we don't vote, or is that because we can reliably vote Democrat, or?
I think it's more because the Black community is perceived as being more reliably Democrat than anything else.
Okay.
And that there's no use trying to get that. But I would hope that on a larger scale, that they look at increasing the party base by attracting Black voters it's not going to be a short-term thing. It's going to take a long-term commitment. I mean, you've had 50 or 60 years where you didn't do a damn thing. You can't expect to reverse that in a midterm. Yeah. In a month or two.
It's funny to me when I say funny, not funny, haha, but just of interest, when I hear white conservatives talk about the GOP being the party of Lincoln and the party of the abolitionist. I think it's interesting then that they, seem to conveniently forget that in the 60s and when Goldwater led the revolt against the civil rights legislation, and then LBJ picked it up and said opportunity, Kennedy / LBJ, and then ultimately LBJ, opportunity, and talked, I can't remember the bargain he called it, but that switched or made it clear, as I think Mr. Smith mentioned in his video, really solidified the black vote behind the Democrats. There is a disconnect between modern conservatives talking about this being the party of Lincoln / the party of abolitionists, blacks should therefore support the GOP, and some of the rhetoric that blacks hear today that consistently make them concerned from the 60s forward, to your point, about whether the GOP is a place for them.
That's why, to me, the GOP and conservatives need to open their damn mouths and show that you care. Because many times people don't know that you care until you show it. Not just say it, do it. And right now,
but what are the party platform? You know, I try to read the Republican Party platform and the Democratic Party platforms, you know, before every convention, just to see where they are and then where they went. And it was another black conservative that told me, you know, I'm not comfortable that that party platform, particularly when everything is expected these days that you have to agree with every single one of those planks, recognizes that the black reality is not encapsulated 100% in those party planks, right? Now, I don't think that that's the case for the Democratic Party either, but to the extent that they're going to require purity, how is it in either party, how is it that a black person can feel comfortable saying they're a Republican or a Democrat if there is purity and 100% requirement to adhere to those planks? That's what I'm saying. To your point, showing it versus, it's like it's this dichotomy, these two competing things. You can say it, but you don't do it. You do it, but you don't say it. Or you say one thing and you do the other. I mean, I'm not saying this very well, but it seems like there's these competing things. So what does a black conservative or a black independent who's trying to decide which party to support or vote for, or what candidate to support and vote for, how do they get behind? How do we make a decision about who to get behind if we have these inconsistencies?
I still say that to me, it comes down to values. And I know that's a very elusive term. It's not like solid in the sense of do this, but it's a long,
So,
it's a
limited government, self-determination and accountability. You're talking about those values on the Republican side?
I'm talking about,
Okay.
for example, we're supposed to be the party of family values. And the family itself seems to be something that's kind of becoming a bit modified now. And so, to what extent do we want to expand to become more encompassing on that issue? But I think that eventually, just got a couple minutes. I think it gets back down to common sense.
Okay.
And I think that despite the fact that education is really jacked up right now because they're really not turning out thinkers, they're turning out automatons really. But I think that it would be helpful to do things that are of an expanding nature rather than restricting. You're not going to grow the party with old white men. The party can't grow with old white men. We got to go out to some new people and try some new things.
But we've been saying that for many, many, many years, and I don't see it changing. In fact, I see folks saying that, but doubling down on the things that don't, on both sides, which aren't inclusive, which don't make it necessarily convincing that a young black professional should want to become a GOPer or should want to be a Democrat.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up here, Robert.
Okay.
Thank you for coming to the show, for
Thank
sure.
you, sir. I appreciate you, as
We're going
always.
to have to come back again. We have to try to finish this never-ending conversation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because change is not instant.
Change is not instant.
It's a process.
It's a process.
And hope this is your second time here, third time. We may come to half of a conclusion next time. I wouldn't count on it.
Thank
But
you for
you never
having me,
know.
sir. Thank you.
The pleasure was mine.